Hello, welcome to Rough Cut Film Review. This is a review of the independent film The Orphan Killer. So to clear this up, the killer is an orphan. He doesn't kill orphans, although, spoiler alert, at one stage he does kill an orphan. So I suppose the title works in two ways. He might kill more than one orphan, but it doesn't really come up in the plot. So some of the other people he murdered, maybe their parents were dead, we don't know. So this is, as I said, an independent slasher that is mighty pleased with itself online. There are really bold claims on there about being the first horror franchise of the 21st century due to its overwhelming fan popularity, although who these people are is slightly more of a mystery. So what we actually have is a cheaply and not entirely well-made slasher horror that boldly claims to defy classifications, but I can classify it for them right now. It's an exploitation horror knockoff. So there you go. Here we have a loose plot revolving around a Michael Myers type character that they've called Marcus Miller, so you know that's a bit different. Michael Myers, Marcus Miller, yeah, sure, that's different enough. Also, while Michael, Jason and the like have a hulking and imposing persona, you know, and a person in the mask that looks very intimidating, here we just sort of have a normal bloke in the mask who doesn't really seem that brooding or unsettling, and that does somewhat diminish the sense of dread. I don't usually do this kind of thing, but actually let me read you some of the press notes so you can really get a sense of what they're trying to get across to you here. It does go on and on, but here's a flavour of it. The Orphan Killer is a tour de force murder flick that defies classification. It goes far beyond current trends in gore and breaks open a new suffering genre of horror. Bear in mind, a review of Martyrs is coming soon. Marcus Miller is a serial murderer hell-bent on teaching his estranged sister Audrey what it means to have family loyalty. His lessons are taught in massive doses of vulgar and unimaginable pain. Throughout her brutal torture, we learn that Marcus is not the only Miller with killer in the bloodline, as Audrey proves to be a formidable adversary. Despite all this, I promise... So, that was actually more difficult to read on with a microphone than I thought. Despite all this, I promise you that there is nothing in here that you have not seen before, you know, in the films that this is ripping off. If I were a more cynical man, I'd suggest that to get the apparent 100,000 Facebook followers or whatever it was, I'd suggest that the people that made this film paid $200 or something, and then they got a load of clicks. You know, you can hire people. I get emails all the time on my YouTube account saying, hey, why don't you pay us money and we'll get people to go onto your site? Sure. Plot-wise, well, there's the two kids, a boy and a girl who witnessed their mother's murder for some reason, now fully grown. The hottie girl who professionally looks after kids, I think she was a teacher, but I didn't quite catch that. But she does so dressing like a stripper, and she goes to church like a stripper as well. And very quickly we realise that she's not wearing any panties while she's looking after the kids in this stripper dress, and they didn't really mention that because this is an exploitation film. Basically, the boy, after witnessing his mother's murder, goes nanas, and in the orphanage, apparently, if you murder another kid brutally and deliberately, you just get brutalised by some nuns. You're allowed to run around with a horror mask on, and they won't tell the authorities. They'll just sort of beat you a bit, because of course brutalising an already brutalised young boy is going to make the situation better, not worse. The key problem here is the filmmakers are incredibly proud of this incredible horror rock star that they've created, and they treat him with a great reverence. Unfortunately, he's just a cheap knockoff of any number of established horror antagonists, in the same way that Digimon seemed to be utterly derivative and exploitative of Pokemon's success, without actually offering anything in its own right. According to the blurb on this, the fans have literally been beating down the door for people to make stuff for them to buy. They want to part with money, you know, they want to play the video game. It features Marcus Miller. They want to buy the mask, they want to do all sorts of things. And it just makes me think of, you know, the kids on the Christmas morning who excitedly wake up and open their presents, but instead of Pokemon, they get Digimon. How incredibly upsetting. I mean, the film makes little sense. It's exploitative. I don't know, maybe the thought's gone into, oh, look, we've had this idea for a horror franchise, crucially not a horror film, and therefore think of all the brilliant things we can do with it in the future without actually making a decent film. Why is a nun sucking off a gentleman in a church in this? Why do we have an adult wearing such a short skirt and no underwear when they're responsible for children? The nicest thing I can probably think to say about this is regarding the sound design, and I believe some of it is really good, in between the cheesy rock that I actually found really objectionable, so they managed to spoil that as well. It's also undermined by really silly noises. I think they've recorded a dog panting or something, and they've used that to represent the killer under his mask, and it's very odd. and, not scary. In reality, if it weren't so fantastically proud of itself and somehow didn't realise that cheap slasher films are coming out all the time and they are 10 a penny, I'd probably felt slightly kinder towards this and just have thought it was a naff film. I've seen dozens of these sorts of films and it absolutely bored me. I know slashers don't exactly have a brilliant track record for explaining why the killer kills people, but when I spent most of the time asking why the killer is doing what he's doing, it's not good. They're not supposed to be complicated, and this isn't complicated, but I didn't understand it. It's sort of self-important, it's ponderous, it throws in lots of brother-sister sexual stuff, and actually I get a sense that they may have forgotten at one point that they're supposed to be brother and sister, because it just doesn't really make sense. They throw in lots of religious stuff, it's a sort of a horror catch-all that, blame the church, it's all the church's fault, but there's no real skill there. It's just throwing it all in and seeing what sticks. Because of all this, the plot makes no sense, and people don't act like actual people, and it just all gets lost in the weeds. It's lazy nonsense, and they'd have been much better off if they hadn't tried to come up with this feeble philosophy for their killer when the killer is sort of eulogising. Obviously they think that's brilliant because this is the new horror franchise of the 21st century. I was bored off my gourd and knew they had no idea what they were talking about. Oh, please keep an eye out for the performance of a character called Father Jack. It's not the one from Father Ted, but there's an excellent scene with him and the church. Really good stuff. Oscar bait. Oh, and on an unrelated note, actually, while I usually get really nice and useful feedback on my reviews, and by useful I don't just mean people being nice to me, I do get useful positive feedback that I think has improved the reviews over time. I had some feedback on YouTube, which was a nice gentleman saying, "This video can suck my dick." Strangely, it wasn't from Noam Chomsky, but if you can guess which of the reviews got the comment, "This video can suck my dick," because I don't really understand why he said that, then there might be a prize or something. I'd love to know why. Also, if you've ever thought, if you're watching one of my reviews and you went, this review can suck my dick, then I'd like to know, because maybe there's more to this. I think I've overthought this, but maybe I haven't, and I just need to find out. Anyway, The Orphan Killer is self-important rubbish. Kind regards, Christopher Thomas.